morning, it's Meredith. So I'm sitting here in our 1969 Cessna 150, November 60254, and my daughter Alex and I are going to go for a short flight to show you the reality of what a student pilot needs to do before they go out for solo. Now, I'm obviously not a student pilot anymore, but I always like to think like a student pilot. I always like to try and put myself in their shoes. What should this person be doing? What should they be thinking? What challenges might they have? So I'm just going to go from beginning to end in order of what I would do to just go out and practice some takeoffs and landings somewhere. So the first thing that I did is load up a sample flight plan in ForeFlight in this airplane from Craig to Hurlong Airport, which is a local non-towered field. And so I'm going to go ahead and send this to flights. And get myself a briefing and kind of go over with you guys what's going on out there today. And with practice, and I emphasize with practice, this whole process shouldn't take more than 5-10 minutes if you know what you're looking for. But student pilots need to practice getting a briefing so they can, shorten up the time that it takes them to accomplish the task. Not rush it and miss stuff, but just to be efficient about it. So, of course, we have the Mayport TFR. I'll put up a little screenshot of what that's all about. Nothing has changed there. There is an AirMet for IFR, and if I go back to maps, I may get an idea of what that's all about. Yep, if we look to our west and north, I can see that there are some IFR conditions, so that would make sense that there would be an AirMet for IFR in our local area. But I'm going to dig deeper to get more information. I'm looking out the window here. It's perfectly clear sky. All of the local airports are clear, so I don't think we're going to have any issues with IFR, but good to know that if I stray too far from home in the immediate future, I could encounter some problematic clouds or visibility. So I'm going to go to the surface analysis chart, which I've been following for the last couple days. You can see we've got mostly high pressure here in the area. Not a whole lot to talk about there. We did get some folks to the west of us, north and northwest, did get some storms yesterday, but nothing that's going to impact us a whole lot in the immediate future. Next, I'm going to go to METARS, so just reports of current weather at the local airports. And at Craig, the latest report was winds 260 at 6 knots, 10 statute miles visibility, and clear sky. At the airport where we're planning to go, similar, winds 250 at 10 knots, 10 miles visibility, clear skies, and all the local airports are also reporting clear skies, so that's good news for us. There's no pilot reports of any significance right now, so I'm going to skip to the cloud coverage for this morning, and by looking at the graphic, I can see that it's mostly clear skies, which is good news. And then surface winds and precipitation pretty much matching up with what we just saw on the METARS, light westerly, southwesterly winds at approximately 10 knots, so not a huge concern for me. And then looking at the TAF or the forecast, I see that for the morning, actually for most of the day today, winds are expected to be consistent with what they are currently. Winds 240 at 11, greater than 6 miles visibility, few clouds at 2,000, scattered 4,000, scattered 25,000. So there could be some cumulus clouds developing this morning to result in that few at 2,000 and scattered at 4,000, but right now there's nothing out there. Looking at the winds aloft, again fairly light and consistent with the surface winds. And as far as NOTAMs for Craig, there's some tower light outages, which you're going to see pretty much all the time. Cell towers that have light bulbs that are out of service. So I'm not super concerned with that stuff. Nothing here that I didn't know about already. We're not flying IFR, so I don't need to worry myself with the instrument approach procedure NOTAMs today. And over at Hurlong, again, some tower light outages. not a concern for me for a day VFR flight. No runway outages or, excuse me, no runway closures or other outages there. So I think we're good to go. And as far as navigation NOTAMs, so I'm going to turn the camera around here so you can get a look at my airplane. So again, this is our VFR only Cessna 150. The only thing electronically I really have for navigation is this VFR only GPS. I don't have VOR or ILS or anything like that. My navigation is the, as they used to say, the Mark 1 eyeball on my chart and my knowledge of the local area. So it doesn't really matter to me if there's any VFR, VORs or GPS out of service, because I'm really not going to be using that stuff anyway. So next, the pre-flight. So in addition to the registration and airworthiness certificate, I've got the good old information manual for the Cessna 150. Sans the emergency procedures, but guess what? We've got that covered on our checklist. So we're good to go there. Next, I'm going to do the pre-flight inspection of the airplane and of ourselves. You can see that the first item on our pre-flight checklist is I'm safe. So I'm feeling fantastic today, so is my passenger. And I've already gotten my standard briefing, so we can mark that complete. Next is to look at the interior things, the documents, the cabin, turn on some switches, check the lights, etc. So first order of business is to check and make sure our documents are still on board, and in this airplane they're located right back there. So the next thing on our checklist, after we've looked at the documents and hobs and tack time, made sure our aircraft is within limits for a 100-hour inspection. And I've noticed something. Normally we have a little sticker here to remind us of when the 100-hour is due, and that sticker is not there. So I'm going to check our records and make sure that our airplane is within its time limits on the 100-hour inspection. So what I'm going to do here, and this is exactly what I would expect a student pilot to do if they encountered this situation. I'm going to take a picture of the tack so I can see what the current tack reading is, and then we're going to go in the office and we're going to check the maintenance logs and see when the last 100-hour or annual was done, so we can make sure that we haven't exceeded that 100-hour limitation. So let's go find the maintenance logs. So according to my photo, the current tack time on the engine is 221.7. Those are the last 3 digits. And if we look at the maintenance entry for this airplane, we can see that the 100-hour inspection was done not too long ago on May 15th at 12:04.5. So that means the next 100-hour inspection is due at, do the math folks, 13:04.5. And if our current time is 1221.7, then we are good to go. So I'm going to make a new sticker to put on the tack for everyone's benefit, but this is exactly what you should do if you're not sure. So one thing you'll notice is that our checklist is a bit more detailed than the checklist in the operating handbook, but we include all of the basic things and then some. We like the flow, how we start at the cockpit and we go around the tail, go around the wing, around the front, and you end up at the pilot's side door where you're going to get in. So it's a nice natural flow. And along the way, we want to make sure that we check some specific things as we go around. So we're going to do that now. All right, so now that we have checked our tack time and confirmed that we're good to go on the 100-hour inspection and installed our new sticker, now it's time to complete the rest of the cabin inspection. So I'm going to go ahead and take out the control lock, and you can follow me over here around the side. I'm going to take off the pitot cover, and then we'll just wander around over on this side. And then the first thing I do before I even get to the rest of the checklist is just to look at the interior of the airplane and make sure that things look right. In other words, that the previous pilot didn't attempt to shut the airplane down the wrong way. So we should find the mixture in the idle cutoff position, because that's how you correctly shut the engine down when you're finished. The throttle should be at idle, the ignition is in the off position, and the master switch is off. Looks to me like all the switches are off that should be off. Now the reason why we keep the beacon on is so that if anybody accidentally turns on the master switch and walks away, we should be able to see the beacon on. Can you show the beacon, Alex? And that would give everybody a clue that the master switch was left on. So I'm gonna leave that on for right now and check the rest of the lights and also put the flaps down. So watch your head, honey. I also checked the fuel gauges. They look full, and I can see that the fuel is dripping a little bit out of the vent, which you could happen if the tanks are really full, so that's not a concern. So walk with me over this way, and we're going to check the rest of the lights. So again, the beacon is on, the nav light is on. Now even though I don't need the nav light to fly during the day for regulatory purposes, I want to check and make sure that it's working for the benefit of the next person who may want to fly at night. So we've got our green nav light is working.
It looks kind of blue.
Yeah, it is. I think because it's LED.
Yeah.
And we've got our taxi and landing light. Now this nav light is interesting, and this is why we have to use this one during the day. Step back a little bit so you can see the whole piece. This is made by a company called U Avionics, and this is our ADS-B out transmitter. So on this airplane, we have to use the nav lights during the day for ADS-B if we want ADS-B function. So that's another good reason for checking it during the day. So that's working correctly. Now we can go back in the cockpit and turn off all the switches. And then continue the rest of our pre-flight. All right, so we're starting the exterior portion of the pre-flight inspection. We just got out of our cabin door, and now I'm just taking a big picture look all around the airplane. So I'm looking to make sure that there's no rivets that are seeping. Looks like it's recently been detailed, which is not a requirement, but kind of nice. Makes it easier to check the airplane when it's cleaner. So I'm looking at the leading edge of the tail, making sure there's no damage there. I'm checking all the screws, making sure everything is in place. I'm looking at the elevator, again, for damage. Now, especially on an older airplane, I mean, this could happen even on a new airplane, but you may see tiny little dings here and there, just like on your car, right? And if you've ever rented a car, probably you remember that when you go to the car rental place and they give you the contract, the salesperson will walk around the car with you and say, okay, there's a little scratch here or a little dent here or whatever, and you both acknowledge it so that you don't get accused of damaging the car and then get charged for damage when you return it. So you always want to make sure when you're looking at the airplane that you become aware of any tiny little minor things so that you can evaluate, okay, is this a big deal or not a big deal? And also you can determine at the end of the flight, is everything still the way that we left it? In other words, are we returning the airplane in the same condition in which we got it? And in either case, is that condition acceptable? So like here, there's a tiny little doodle on the trailing edge of the elevator on the left side, but this is not an airworthiness issue. The mechanics have looked at it and said, no, it's fine. If I wanted the airplane to be perfect, I would get this fixed, but it's a training airplane. It doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be well above the minimum standard for sure. And hopefully you'll see at the end of this that we go above and beyond the minimum standard, but something small like this would not be a deal killer on a pre-flight inspection, but something you definitely want to be aware of and notice. So always try and be a detective on your pre-flight inspections and see how many tiny little things you can notice. That shows us, the instructors, that you're paying attention out there. So now I'm going to bend down here and I'm going to gently push up on the elevator, and I'm going to check the elevator horn. Here, let me have this so I can show people. We're going to look in here and make sure that the cables are not binding or grinding. All of the screws are in place. Everything feels good there. Now with the rudder, I see a lot of people grabbing the rudder on the trailing edge here. Please don't do that. This is a relatively weak point on the surface of it. If you're going to manipulate the rudder, try and be nice to the airplane and grab it, hold it on the bottom, the chunky part here. And then you can gently move it left and right. Listen, look, feel. There's a stop here. You want to check and make sure it's hitting the stop, so it's not going over center. There are some safety wires here you want to make sure are connected, and everything else there looks pretty good. Another thing that I always tell my students to look for on an airplane if they're not sure whether or not something is right during a pre-flight inspection is symmetry. And so I just found, again, not an airworthiness issue in my opinion, but something that I would expect a alert student pilot to notice, is the fact that that little screw right there on the end is missing. So if you weren't sure whether that screw should be there, walk around the other side of the rudder and look at its partner on the other side, and you'll see, yep, there is a screw over there, so we probably ought to replace that one that's missing. Another place you want to check for missing screws is on inspection panels. So I just found one right here that's missing, so I'm going to go over to the maintenance shop and get a replacement for that one in addition to the one that's on the rudder. You also want to be on the lookout, especially if you're the owner of an airplane, but certainly if you're the renter of the airplane, is for paint chips or corrosion developing. Now, we have spent a ton of money getting these airplanes painted and touched up, but let's face it, we are in Florida. The salt water just destroys paint jobs on boats, on cars, and on airplanes. So it's an ongoing battle. We have our planes treated with something called Corrosion X. It's basically this goop that gets squirted inside the airframe every time they do an annual inspection to keep that sort of thing from happening, especially on the interior portions of the metal surfaces, but surface corrosion happens. So whenever I see spots like that starting to develop, we put that on the to-do list for the maintenance shop when they get it in for 100-hour annual to do a touch-up to keep the metal in good shape. Alright, so I've completed my inspection of the tail section. Now I'm going to walk my way toward the right wing. And notice how I'm holding my hand on the airplane. It's kind of like a reminder of myself to look at all the things attached to the airplane that aren't necessarily on the checklist, like the emergency locator beacon antenna. Now we come to the flap. Again, something that's not on the manufacturer's checklist, but I always like to look for, are these little guys right here. I actually don't know the technical name for them, but they're kind of like door stoppers. They're these little plasticky plugs that are intended to prevent wear and tear as this flap goes up and down and potentially rubs this metal against this metal. So it's just to prevent wear and tear, and it looks like they all look pretty new actually. So I think the mechanics have been keeping up with that. So now we're going to check the flap. So come down here, and again, just looking at the whole surface of it, everything looks like it's in good shape. I'm checking the track of the flap, making sure that it's rolling on its track correctly. I want to make sure that it's not jammed up. So that all looks good. Next thing I'm coming to is the aileron. And just like on the elevator, I want to kind of lift it up and check and make sure that all the screws are in place. Any safety wire that's supposed to be there is there. All the way down the line, just like the flap, I want to make sure that the actuator isn't jammed up. So that looks pretty good. Now if you come over here, we get a nice sight line of the leading edge of the wing, and this is a good place to check for any damage that could have been as the result of a bird strike or impact with another object in the hangar or on the ramp. So that all looks good. And now again with my hand, I'm going to walk all the way down the wing. I'm checking those inspection panels, making sure all the screws are on, the strut. And now I'm coming to the door frame. So again, not specifically on the checklist, but I'm looking at the whole condition of the door frame and the hinges, making sure that the door is able to open and close correctly. Then I'm going to come up here and take a sample of fuel. Oh, remember how I mentioned that corrosion X, that anti-corrosion goop? That's what this is. Starting to leak out a little bit. So some people think, oh, is there an oil leak? No, there's no oil up there. That's actually the anti-corrosion stuff doing its job. So it's a little ugly, but necessary. So now I'm going to take a sample of fuel out of the right tank. And you don't have to fill the cup up, obviously, or even use this type of cup. But if I hold it up to some white paint, I can see that it's just pure fuel. And if your instructor has never showed you what water in fuel would look like, I'm going to intentionally pour a little water from my water bottle into the fuel. I'm not going to put it back in the airplane, of course. I just want to show you what it would look like if there was some water in the fuel. Can you see it floating around down there on the bottom? That's what water would look like if you found it in your fuel. The next thing I'm going to check is the landing gear structure. You can see here that the pin that holds the wheel on is intact, so that's good. And then we're going to look at the brake pads. Now, not all airplanes have the brake and the brake pad exposed like this, and it may be a little hard for you to see in the video, but where I'm pointing my finger, right there and right there, those are the brake pads. They're actually kind of long and they go down that way, but you can check them out if they're visible and see if they are equally thick to each other and that there's no cracks on them. And also, we should not see any hydraulic fluid leaking out of the brake line. So if we look on the checklist for the exterior, we can see we've done the elevator, rudder trim, right wing, fuel tank sump, and quantity. Now we have to check the quantity of fuel and then check the oil level. So the next thing I need to do is climb up on the wing. I need to climb up on the wing and check the quantity. Now this can be a little bit tricky. Step back a little bit, honey. This can be a little bit tricky, especially if you have any knee issues. You may not want to actually use the step that's on the airplane. You may want to get an exterior step, but I'm going to go ahead and use the step. So 1, 2, 3. And then I've got a little dipstick where I can measure how much fuel is in there. Now I can see it's almost all the way to the top. And the measuring stick showed me that there was about 11 gallons, which if it's equal on the other side, that's 22 gallons of fuel. That's way more than I need for this flight. Now for the gascolator drain, Cessna never intended for this sample to be caught in a cup. Certainly not in 1969 when this airplane was built. So depending on your personal wingspan of your arms, you may or may not be able to catch the sample. I can do it pretty easily in this airplane, but a key to not getting totally messy when you do it is to first identify the location on the belly where the sample is going to get ejected. So I'm going to take my cup and I'm going to put it under that thing first and then pull. So that way I didn't spill any on the ground or on myself. Now it looks pretty good. checking the oil can be tricky depending on the airplane that you're flying. Fairly easy on this Cessna 150 with this big flap that comes up. I've got nice access to the engine compartment, and you can see the dipstick. I just unscrew it right there. And depending on the lighting outside, it can be hard to see how much oil is actually on the dipstick. So what I recommend is either use a flashlight, or you can just very quickly pull it out and then look in the sunlight, and I can see I have 4 quarts, which is what I need in this engine. So very carefully, I'm going to put it back in and screw it on. Again, in some aircraft engines, you can over torque this, so please don't do that because you could actually break it. So when you're checking the fuel level in an airplane like this one, you have a little meter dipstick. You want to carefully put it in the tank, put your finger on top, then lift it up and read the level. And do it a couple times to make sure you got the suction in the tube good, so that you're capturing all the fuel that's in there. Yep, and I can see that that's about 11 gallons, so the same that's on the other side. But whatever you do, please, please, please hang on to the stick. I can't tell you how many times we've had students somehow manage to drop this stick into the tank, and then we have to go fishing for it, which is really time consuming and annoying. Then also make sure that you put the cap back on tight, and this is a good opportunity to just look at the whole top of the wing for damage also. So now that I've completed my walk-around inspection and I've arrived back at my cockpit door, I'm going to look at the checklist to make sure that I didn't forget anything. Remember, it's a checklist, not a do list. So just, you know, I've been making a video, I've had my daughter, there were some other distractions, so now I'm just going to look at the list and make sure that I didn't forget anything. Level. And I know there was those 2 screws that we found. So that all looks good. And the windshield is clean. Perfect. So now it's time to go find my daughter and load up the airplane and get going. Before we loaded up though, I had to get the tow bar and tug the airplane to the front of the ramp for engine start. The reason why we have that policy in place is to avoid blowing prop wash into our neighbors' hangars. And you'll notice how we have an airplane parked way out here by the end of the hangar row. And this is your guideline for where an airplane needs to be. It needs to be at least past the end of this building right here, on this side of the hangar row before you start your engine. All right, so we've completed our start checklist, and now we're taxiing out onto the ramp area. I noticed there's another aircraft pulling in. I'm just going to hold here for a moment to see where he goes. Try to be nice to our neighbors. All right, so we'll stop over here and check a couple things, like first the ATIS.
13530 weather, wind 2506, visibility 10, sky condition clear. Temperature 28 dew point 22, altimeter 3000, visual approach runway 23 in use. Mayport TFR is active, all VFR departures advised, direction of flight. Your direction of flight is northbound, main clear, class Charlie airspace, or contact Jack's approach on 124.9er. Advise on this contact, you have information, Juliet. Correct tower information, Juliet, time 13530 weather, wind 2506, visibility 10, sky condition clear. Temperature 28 dew point 22, altimeter 3000, visual approach runway 23 in use. Mayport TFR is active. All VFR departures advise direction of flight. Your direction of flight is northbound main clear class Charlie airspace or contact Jack's approach on 124.9er. Advise.
All right, so now we're going to go back to our checklist. Pre-taxi, radios, ATIS I got, altimeter set, heading indicator I set, radios GPS are tuned, and transponder is set to 1200, and all I need to do now is get my clearance to taxi. So I have a whole other video on radio communications, but I'm just going to show you basically today what I would expect from any of my student pilots on their first solo. So we have everything set. I'm gonna look all around, kind of assess the situation. Down in the run-up area, looks like there's 3 aircraft, so I'm expecting there could be a bit of a delay. Thinking maybe I may have to do my run-up in the tower ramp or request that from the tower if it looks like it's jammed up down there as I get a little closer. So let's see how this goes. Craig Ground, good morning, Cessna 60254 at the Jet Center with information Juliet, ready to taxi VFR to the west.
60254, Craig Ground, runway 23 via Alpha Charlie.
Alpha Charlie 32 60254.
Did you catch that? I was cleared to runway 23, which I knew was the active runway, but I said 32 and didn't realize it, and the controller didn't notice or correct me. See, even pros make mistakes sometimes. Good news is I taxied to the correct runway and everything went smooth from there. But don't feel bad if you make a mistake on the radio. I just did. Remember that controllers make mistakes too. I've had numerous times where a controller has cleared me to land on the incorrect runway and I've had to correct them. So everybody just needs to pay attention and use good judgment.
I'm looking at the windsock. You know, the ATIS at a towered field could be almost an hour old, so other than sort of general information, I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to what the wind direction is in the ATIS. I'm looking at the windsock because that's my reality. So the guy that was number 1 in line just pulled out. And here's where you have to use your judgment and really pay attention to what the other aircraft are doing. So there is room for me in that first position right now. But because those other 2 people have been sitting there for a while, I'm expecting that they could be ready to pull out at any moment. So before I taxi in front of that Cherokee who's now in the number 2 position, I'm going to sort of slow down and attempt to either make eye contact or just confirm that he's not going to start rolling out right when I'm in front of him. He should look before he pulls out, but we can't rely on other airplanes to do what they're supposed to do. So I'm going to very carefully here sort of creep up to him, kind of see if I can get a sense for what they're doing. Not moving. They've got their heads down in the cockpit, so now he sees me, so everything is cool. So I'm just going to pull over here and take the number 1 position.
Foxtrot behind the company and contact tower 132.1.
Stand behind the company at Foxtrot and contact tower 132.1, Lucky 546, thank you.
Morning, ground, Polaris 444 Yankee Golf, taxi from Sky Harbor, Juliet.
November 444 Yankee Golf, Craig Ground, runway 3.
39 Zulu Whiskey, Craig Tower, enter at left downwind, runway 23, report midfield. Enter left downwind, 23, report midfield, 739 Zulu Whiskey.
All right, so during the taxi, all my instruments looked fine. I didn't notice any anomalies there. I switched over to tower because I'm finished taxiing. The next communication I'm going to have to make is to the tower, so I've got them in the active position. So run up and systems check, nose wheel is straight because I pulled into my parking space straight.
23, clear touch and go.
I'm holding the brakes, flight controls free and correct. So if you're a solo student, obviously you're not going to have a passenger here, but Alex, just watch your knees. That aileron goes up, that one goes down. That one goes up, that one goes down. Elevator and rudder look good. Don't forget your rudder is a flight control. Flight instrument, so airspeed is 0, attitude is level. This is showing approximate field elevation with the current altimeter set. Vertical speed is 0, and my current heading is more or less matching up with the magnetic compass, and my turn coordinator is alive. Okay, double check the fuel selector. It is on. Mixture is going to go to full rich now. Check my trim. It is in the takeoff position, but I confirmed it visually when I was doing my flight controls free and correct. Now we're going to go to throttle 1700 RPM, and we're going to check temps and pressures. So over here on the tack, holding the brakes smoothly, running up.
Craig Tower 40 Golf, got that traffic on a short final now.
Wheel temp is up,
Number 2 runway.
tack is up, suction is up, fuel is up, ammeter, we have positive, and oil pressure is in the green. So now we're going to do our magneto check. There's one side, isolating the right. About 50 drop. Then the left. About a 50 drop, that looks good. Carburetor heat, big old drop, so I know that's working. Then throttle to idle. Good. And carburetor heat off. Now, here's where you're going to get to see the reality of operating at a busy towered field like Craig. So I'm sitting here in the run-up area, kind of out of everybody's way. But I have 1, 2 aircraft holding short for runway 23, which is my assigned departure runway. Got one guy that's departing runway 32 at Echo. We got a Pilatus rolling up. I don't know what runway he's going to depart. And I got 1, 2 people off to my left that are also getting in line. So there's literally no place I can go right now. I just have to sit here and wait for there to be a gap. And I want to be ready to take that gap and get out of here without rushing. So what I'm going to do right now is review my before takeoff and my emergency checklist. So engine failure during takeoff, throttle to idle, brakes. We basically want to keep this thing on the ground. Mixture idle cut off, ignition off, master switch off, so a nice flow this way. Engine failure after takeoff. Push the yoke forward. All right, so if I'm pitched up for VY, I'm gonna have to give a good push forward, lower that nose to keep this airplane flying, and I'm looking for 60 knots. So I've got that identified.
Start your crosswind turn as soon as possible.
The engine is dead, mixture idle cut off, fuel off, ignition off. I'm going to want full flaps to get this airplane flying as slow as possible without stalling it, and then master switch off. I've got the windows open right now, but otherwise I would crack the doors, make sure that we can both get out of here, and then help Alex with her seatbelt. So while we're waiting for all these people to clear, we'll take a look at the takeoff distance. We're not at max gross weight in this airplane, not even close. We've got maybe a 10 knot headwind, so I'll look at that row. We're at sea level, but it is warm outside. So we have to add a little fudge factor there for the heat, but otherwise it thinks that my ground run should be 500 feet. Now increase distances 10% for each 35 degrees Fahrenheit above. So we're not quite 35 degrees above, but let's just go ahead and increase it by 10%, so that would make it 550. Let's just round it up to 600. And 600 is kind of a good number to use mentally, because each runway stripe, they're separated by 200 feet. So I know that as soon as I pass 3 runway stripes, I should be airborne. And my abort point on this runway is going to be the first taxiway. But now we're kind of stuck, waiting.
Who's holding short of 2-3 at Foxtrot?
Craig Tower 4377 Mike, Banner tow ready to go 23.
November 4377 Mike, Craig Tower, runway 23 at Foxtrot. Clear for takeoff, right close traffic is approved. Report midfield.
All right, 23 clear for takeoff, right traffic, call you midfield, 77 Mike.
And 77 Mike, the traffic straight ahead is on a right turn heading 280.
I'll give him the sight, 77 Mike.
And Craig Tower, Cessna 60254 is number 123 at Fox. Change the plans, I just need one lap in the pattern, full stop.
60254, Crane Tower, runway 23 at Foxtrot, clear for takeoff, left close, traffic is approved, report midfield, follow the Archer in front of the Cessna straight ahead.
Okay, clear for takeoff 23 at Fox, make a left traffic, looking for the Archer, 60254. All right, it's getting a little late and a little hot, so just for purposes of the video, we're just going to make one little lap in the pattern.
Remember 2 Delta Mike, runway 23.
Okay, so as I roll down the runway, I'm going to be checking my engine instruments, checking the windsock. Looks like we got a little bit of a right crosswind, so I'm going to throw that correction in. And I see my 3 stripes and my abort point, so here we go. Oil temp and pressure is good.
23 at Foxtrot, clear for takeoff, right channel west approved by Q2.
Pre-tower, Archer 790, Foxtrot, holding short 23, Foxtrot ready for southbound departure.
Archer 790, Foxtrot, Crane Tower, hold short of runway 23 at Foxtrot.
Transitioning into a crab.
Tower, Simpson Mike, runway fill down with 23, banner pick.
777 Mike, banner pickup is approved.
Banner pickup approved, Simpson Mike.
2 Delta Mike, traffic off your left is banner aircraft is in the side picking up the banner.
We'll be looking 2 Delta Mike.
Tower 254, where's this Archer you wanted me to follow?
All right, 254, you can start your crosswind turn.
254.
Delta Mike has the banner pick in sight.
All right, but I'm checking for traffic because I don't trust this guy. So we're starting a left crosswind turn. And you know, this is a good lesson for you student pilots too.
Mike, fly upwind and keep that traffic.
You know, let's say that you had a long ground delay and you're hot and you're like, ugh, you know what, I'm just done. I want to fly a little bit, but I don't really feel like going anywhere.
Like at 311, you can make that right.
Then just tell the tower that your plans changed. You're like, you know what, I'm not departing to the west anymore. I just want to stay in the pattern. Even if it's just for one lap, and that's okay.
77 Mike, you can make that left turn to the south now.
Left turn south, Simpson Mike.
It is hot out today, so notice we're, you know, trying to climb at our best rate here, but that best rate is not a great rate. But we'll make it to pattern altitude here, probably midfield on the downwind. And there was a little bit more of a crosswind than advertised, but that's all right. All right, so here we are approaching pattern altitude. So I'm going to reduce the power.
546, contact Jack's departure 124.9.
Contact Jack's departure on 124.9. Have a good day.
Tower 254, left midfield, downwind 23, full south.
At November 254, runway at 23, clear 2 lanes.
Clear to land 23, 60254. Okay.
What's the wind?
The wind's just switched up. It's 320 at 12, gusting to 18. After 254 lands, we're going to switch to runway 32.
Appreciate it. Tower 66111, we can take 32.
At November 66111, where you at? Can you make that left turn and hold short of 32 at Echo?
Hey, firm we can.
66111, hold short of runway 32 at Echo.
Hold short 32 at Echo, 66111.
So this is a good situation too, right? So he just said there's a pretty decent crosswind on runway 23, which I know I can handle, but if you were a student pilot and you're like, oh crap, he just cleared me to land on 23, but I'm really not comfortable with that crosswind component. Well, you got to tell him. You can't just, you know, man up and deal with it. Although, you know, if it's a light crosswind, that would be great. But if it's, you know, 10, 15 knots, you may not be, on your first solo, you might not be comfortable with that. That's usually why we'll tell the tower controller if we've got a first student solo, and we encourage you guys to tell them, hey, Brian, this is my first solo. I'm not really comfortable with this wind. But let me kind of show you. So I'm going to have a pretty decent right aileron and left rudder here. I just fly it all the way down.
November 66111, runway 32 at Echo, clear for takeoff from 2 miles upwind, right, close traffic to the pre-report midfield.
So you'll see how I finished that landing with my aileron all the way into the wind.
We're departing west, 66111.
I took my time with it.
Left turn to the west of the proof.
All right, clear to the west.
So this airplane can totally handle that wind. The question is, can you? And that is the million-dollar question we have to answer when we're preparing you for your first solo flight.
Runway 32, clear touch and go. I got one more departure in front of you.
But I'm gonna keep the airplane under control the whole time. Exit on this taxiway, and then run my checklist.
Flight 691, runway 32 at Echo, clear for takeoff. Proceed on course to the south.
32 at Echo, clear for takeoff on course south, Flight 691.
And November 79 Sierra Foxtrot, you can pull on to runway ground, but 312 is
so now, after landing, flaps, go ahead and retract. RP'd off. Landing light, I never turned it on because I didn't need it, and I'll lean the mixture. And we'll go ahead and taxi this poor hot girl back to the ramp and go get some lunch. Sound like a plan?
32 via Bravo, Charlie. Right, 32 via Bravo, Charlie.
Thank you.
Clear ground Cessna 60254, Bravo 2 for the Jet Center.
$254, you want to go to Jet Center, man?
Affirm.
254, text the Jet Center via Bravo, Tower Ramp Alpha.
Bravo, Tower Ramp Alpha to the Jet Center 254.